transition to hardback is always a scary thing. You worry that you're going to lose fans. You worry that that you're going to disappoint fans. You know, they're used to picking you up in paperback, and they kind of are less judgmental about paperback books because they don't pay so much for them. And I can understand that. I know how that goes. So yeah, this is a really scary thing to go to hardback, and the reception has been extraordinary. I think a large part due to this beautiful cover that Daniel Dos Santos did. He's an excellent artist. He's done all my Mercy Thompson series and also the Alpha and Omega series, and he's extremely good. And then the cover team at Ace puts them together. One of the important things in urban fantasies, because you ask the readers to believe this big whopper that there are vampires and werewolves in the real, at least I hope it's a big whopper, that there are vampires and werewolves in the real world. You have to set it in a really real setting, and that's you know, that's where the urban part of urban fantasy comes in. So the world has to feel real, and part of that reality is that your people have to have jobs. They have to have a way to make a living. They can't just, you know, run around and have adventures. So I knew that I needed her to have a job, and so I was trying to think of things, and that kind of gritty realism, you really have to do something that you've done. And I thought, well, I could make her a bagel bagger, which I did, and that's not very exciting. Or I could have her grading trees in a tree nursery, which I've also done, and that's not very exciting. And but we have, at that point in time, we'd owned Volkswagens for probably 10 or 12 years, old Volkswagens, because we were not rich and famous. And my husband's an excellent backyard mechanic. It's either, you know, you walk or you learn to fix your own car. And I thought that would be just really fun, because Volkswagens they're quirky. They're quirky cars. Especially older ones are very well engineered, and they're made so that you can fix them cheaply. That the old ones were really easy to fix. And I know a lot of stories about funny things that have happened to people. And I thought, I could do that. I could make her a Volkswagen mechanic and really get in there and get because I don't turn a wrench. You know, that would be really bad. If I took a wrench to a car, it would never run again. But I've held a lot of wrenches for my husband and talked to a lot of mechanics. And our Volkswagen mechanic, who helped us keep our cars running, was excellent and very, very cool to talk to. So I thought that would be an awesome job for her to have. I thought, oh, she's going to be a Volkswagen mechanic because I know Volkswagen cars, and because it's you know, a lot of mechanics anymore are slick mechanics. They work in the big shops. They work for the dealerships because of the way cars are made now. The backyard mechanic, the old small shop mechanic is dying, and one of the places that they're really staying in business is Volkswagen, particularly on the West Coast, where Volkswagens are very popular. And separately, I had decided to name her Mercedes because I wanted something that was kind of, you know, I don't know, it fell off the tongue. I'm a fantasy writer by trade. That's what I did before I wrote the urban fantasies, was standard fantasies in which I could make up my own names. And so names are magical to me, and I thought Mercedes is such a very formal and big name, and Mercy is such a short, cute, and I thought, okay. So as I was writing, I'm going, oh, I've got Mercedes, the Volkswagen mechanic, and so I just left it in, and because people do that, they have names that are either appropriate or really inappropriate to their jobs. That's fun. I'm still a fantasy writer, having a great time. The New York Times thing is kind of surreal. I really, it's hard to when you make the transition from being a mid-list author, which is, you know, you can sell your books to the booksellers all the time, but you need another job, maybe several more jobs to make a living at it, and it's a pretty good hobby, to being able to write 2 books a year and know you're going to sell them, and it's kind of a change in lifestyle. My husband and I have been married for 23 years, and our whole married life, he went out and did the 9-to-5 thing and worked his rump off, and I stayed home with kids and wrote books on the side. And about 2 years ago, we started going, wow, our family, it's just not working right. The bills are kind of getting not paid and things like, what's going on? And we sat down and talked about it and realized that's because my job had become a full-time job and I couldn't do both. And so we looked at what we're doing, and it was a big step because my husband's is a computer geek. He makes pretty good money. And we sat and looked at it and said, well, I'm having a lot more fun with my job than he was having with his job. So he quit, and he's doing the household thing and keeping the website up and running. And we bought a rundown farm, and he's fixing that up and he says he's got to get a job so he can take a vacation. But yeah, that's the biggest step that I noticed is the change in our lifestyle. It's more fun. It's not really different from writing characters in urban fantasy from writing characters in straight fantasy, at least for me, because for me, I've always been a character writer. I've always been about who the people are. And in straight fantasy, just as in urban fantasy, you really want your people believable because you have so many unbelievable things going on. The thing that is different with urban fantasies, I can be more open about what I'm saying about things like race and color and who people are and what they're doing, and people can relate to them better, I think, which is an advantage in that I don't have to be so in your face about it as I do in fantasy for people to pick it up. But it also is a disadvantage in that I have to be careful not to be too much in your face with it with the urban fantasy. One of the things that has been terrific about playing with characters is that the Tri-Cities in Eastern Washington is really a melting pot. I lived in Chicago. Chicago is not a melting pot. We had a little meat packing or a little meat store just around the corner from where we used to live in Chicago. And you'd walk in and they'd be speaking Gaelic. It's an Irish meat store, and they don't speak Gaelic in Ireland, you know. And our downstairs neighbors who were Greek had been living in the U.S. for 30 years, still spoke Greek. His wife couldn't speak English. So Chicago's not a melting pot, but the Tri-Cities is. Everybody pretends that it's just a normal suburb that's just where everybody's just like everybody else, and there's just a rainbow of colors. We have every race imaginable, every language, largely because of the nuclear industry there and the big government companies that come in to run it, to run the cleanup and things. So it's fun. I really enjoy it. I get to play. I'd like to say we've lived off and on in the Tri-Cities for about 15 years. We moved there originally in 1990. My husband's bilingual in Spanish, and he took a job teaching science in Spanish at a middle school in Pasco. And when we drove into it, my husband looked, Montana's a gorgeous country. Both of us were born and raised in Montana. And Mike in particular is from a little town called Plains, which is right in the, oddly enough, because its name is kind of ironic. It's in the mountains, and it's just, you know, trees and gorgeous mountains and snow-covered peaks and things. And we're driving into the Tri-Cities, which is kind of dry and desolate and treeless hills and just desolate, just not immediately gorgeous. And we're looking around, and Mike says, "Okay, if I get this job, we're moving in 2 years. I can't handle this for longer than 2 years." But it seems like we kept moving back. We moved away to Eugene, Oregon for a while, where my husband started doing the computer programming, and then got a chance to move back to the Tri-Cities. And we thought, oh, that would be kind of cool. So we moved back to the Tri-Cities for a couple, 2 or 3 years, and then he started having to work 70-hour weeks at his job. Said, "I can't do this." So we moved to Butte, Montana, which is my hometown, for a couple of years, and then the books took off. He quit his job, and we had a powwow and said, "Where are we going to live?" And the rest of the family's going, "We have to move out of Butte. Butte is a wonderful place. I love Butte, but winters are 9 months long, and sometimes you don't get summers. You know, it's pretty brutal." And everybody else wanted to move back, and boy, if you're going to write a series in the Tri-Cities, it really helps to be there because it's changing. It changes all the time. When my publisher asked me to write an urban fantasy, first of all, it's my editor, and she reads my books, or reads my, let's see, let me start over. My editor and I read the same kinds of books, and we exchange reading lists. We're both big readers. And she knew I read a lot of urban fantasy. So when they wanted to get to have some more urban fantasy, this was early on. I mean, Jim Butcher and Charlene Harris and Laurel K. Hamilton were really the only people. I guess Kelly Armstrong was starting and Kim Harrison was starting, but that was it. And they asked if I could write an urban fantasy, and I said, "Oh, that would be really fun." So I sat down, and I know that you have to ground these in a city. That's what you have to do. And I thought, well, Spokane's not too far away, and Seattle's not too far away. I could do one or the other. And then I looked around and I said, wait a minute, the Tri-Cities, we have all these kinds of people. We have the nuclear industry and all the big government contractors and all the secret hush-hush government agencies are there. And then you have the agriculture. They do marvelous wines and cherries and fruits and things, and we have a huge Hispanic population, and there's so many cultures and so much to play with. There's a Native American reservation just over the Oregon border, and I'm going to set up right here. This will be really fun. And I did, and it was. In fact, Mercy's garage is exactly where our old VW mechanic's garage was. And it shares a lot of similarities with it. So,
being home when you
absolutely, yes. And I don't actually take, most of the time, I don't actually take places that people that are there, but I will take areas and stick the right buildings in. I have a lot of people ask me, okay, which of the A houses does Warren live in? And I have to tell them, oh, you know, I just made it's in that area, but it's not anybody's house because I don't want people going up to people's houses and knocking on the door. But the fun thing about writing a series, more fun than writing like a duology or something, is that it's okay. You can play with bit characters and be patient with it, because they can always come back on stage and you can play with them a little bit more. And in that, it's just a gift. I really enjoy that. I can have a walk-on character come in, and I know a lot about them, and I know I want to do stuff with them, but the story doesn't call for their presence. I think that's okay, because I can do it next book. They can come out next book. I had a lot of readers wrote to me after Iron Kissed, and they really wanted to see Stefan, my vampire, and he wasn't an Iron Kissed at all because he didn't have any part in the story. And I'm like, no, it's okay, it's okay. He'll come back in Bone Crossed. I have a big story for Stefan, but he doesn't belong in this story. And so it gives me a lot of more playroom than the shorter series or the single standalone books do. And that's a lot of fun. And it allows me to slowly add depth to characters, particularly Mercy's character, so that people feel like they really know her, like they could walk into a bar and see this, you know, Native American girl, looks maybe a little Hispanic, maybe, and in a mechanic's T-shirt that's covered in grease. You go, oh, that's Mercy. You know, that's fun. That's fun. I don't have it mapped out in my head. My husband would laugh because he's very meticulous. And when I first started writing, it drove him crazy. What do you mean you're 400 pages in and you don't know how it ends? No, I get kind of a vague idea, and we'll see what works best. No, I don't plan it ahead of time, and certainly after 7 books, I'll see. And you know, if I hit the 6th book and it doesn't work, we'll talk with the publisher. My editor is awesome, and if I say, you know, I'm running out of story, this is not going anywhere, can I go somewhere else with it? I'm sure that we can deal. But I don't feel that way about Mercy. I have a lot of stories to tell about her, and her world is pretty complex. And you know, I want to play with the undercover cop, and I want to play with the witches. The next Silverborn, which is going to be the next book next year, has got a lot of witches in it, and the Fae are just this huge well of folklore that I can delve into. So at this point, I can't see getting tired of it. So after I fill out fulfill the contracts that I have, then I'll go take a look and see how we feel, how the readers feel, how I feel, how my publishing house feels. And if I think I can keep going and do a good job, I will. If I don't, we'll maybe take a break and do some other things. I have some other projects. I have several of the fantasy stories are kind of, you know, hitting at the door right now. So we'll see what happens. I have a really good memory. As long as I'm stressed out. I'm stressed out. I have, you know, I can't remember my own name. But as long as I'm relaxed and when I'm writing, I have a really good memory. I really, they just stay there. And if I forget something, well, I'll think of something better. I just don't worry about it. I don't sweat the small stuff. What I have found out over the years is that if I write my ideas down, I write little ideas down and keep notes, I never read them. So I don't do that. I just keep it in my head. And if it goes away, I'll think of something better. I don't panic. I've always been a horse nut. My husband says we're pod people. We get together and that's all we talk about. He laughs, which is really nice. You know, most husbands of pod people don't laugh. Not after 7 horses. Yeah, I've had one of my horses I've had for 22 years. He's 26 now. I had him since he was 4. And he just traveled along with us, and we'd board him out here or there, and he started getting old, and so I picked up a second one while we were still in the Tri-Cities to ride, and so we had the 2, and we moved to Butte, and we were boarding, and I thought, oh, we need, you know, Montana, Butte, Montana, not all of Montana, Bozeman is extremely expensive, and so is Missoula, but Butte, Montana is really high up. It has so its weather patterns are pretty extreme. It gets really, really cold. It has 9 months of winter, and not many people want to move there. So land prices are still pretty inexpensive. And I thought, oh, let's get a place where I can just keep my horses with me. That would be really cool. And we looked around and found this a deal on a it's a manufactured home on 44 acres. We were looking for like 2 or 3, you know, but it was a steal of a deal, and we couldn't pass it by. And so we picked it up, and then all my horse buddies from Eastern Washington said, "You have 40 acres. I have this horse. It's been sitting in my field. It's not doing anything. Would you like this horse?" And so it's sort of like how Rome conquered the world in a fit of absent-mindedness. We acquired all of our horses in a fit of absent-mindedness. We have one that was sort of a rescue. She was on the place. It was 40 acres. It has one fence all the way around it. And they had this Mustang that had been there for at least 15 years. She's 20 years old, and you know that because she's got it branded on her butt. Her year of birth is branded on her butt. And the neighbors all said, nobody's done anything with her. They can't catch her. She's been loose on this place for all these years. And the gentleman who owned the farm offered to, you know, if we couldn't take her, he would take care of it, which means, of course, you know, shoot her. And I thought, oh no, can't do that, can't do that. So here I have all my beautiful Arabs with their long necks and their, you know, graceful bodies, and this Mustang who looks like a small draft pony, maybe prehistoric. She's got a head like a rhinoceros, where her eyes are really small and low down, and she runs around with the Arabs like, I'm a beautiful Arab too. And it's just really funny. It's cute. She's become near and dear to her heart. And but we acquired 6 horses there through various means. So and then we decided to move back to the Tri-Cities, and that was kind of an adventure in itself. getting the Mustang on a horse trailer. She tamed down quite a bit when the other horses were there, because they kind of like to be with each other. And my horses are all pocket ponies. They know that people bring treats and don't work them too hard. So when you walk out, they all glom onto you. People who come to my place who don't know horses get attacked, and I feel really bad for it. It can be pretty overwhelming, but it's fun. I like it. Yeah, it's called a pre-foot round panel, a round arena, where you have just fence panels that hook together. And I just fed them in the night before. I fed all the horses in there, and then we shut the gate. And then I led all my other horses out after they were through eating and left the Mustang in. And then we just pulled panels and shrunk it down until it wasn't very big, and my husband roped her. And we were all waiting to see what happened, and she just stood there. And so he reached over and he rubbed her forehead, and it was the cutest thing you ever saw. She was scared, she was shaking, but she didn't do anything. And he rubbed her forehead, and she just closed her eyes and leaned into him like, oh, that feels so good. So she's got a white star right in the middle of her forehead, and we call it her magic spot. You know? And we led one of our old fogey tame horses up into the trailer first, and just walked behind her and put a butt rope behind her, and she walked right into the trailer. She loaded better than some of well, she loaded better than my old fogey, my old man that I've had for 22 years, who should know better. But we were pretty surprised. So now she's the luck of the farm. We can't get rid of her. She's the reason we do well. So we were broke and down and out in Benton City, which is where we live now, but this was before Benton City, Washington. And Mike's folks offered to sell us their van again, which is like a Twinkie on wheels. And my husband didn't want it very badly. He'd grown up with Vanagons because he's got a huge family. And Vanagons are the cheapest vehicle that they could put their whole family in. They seat 8 people, and they get pretty good gas mileage for a big vehicle like that. They get 20 to 22 miles per gallon. So he wasn't very excited about it. But I thought, you know, our old car died, and I thought, well, okay. So we bought the van from them. And we bought it in that they gave it to us and said, pay us back for it sometime. They were awesome. And it was just fun with kids. It's just like having your own mobile home that comes with you. And they're quirky. One of my favorite things to do, they have no nose. The end of the bumper is like 6 inches from your toes. Is to put somebody who's never been in a van again in the side seat, and drive up really fast, like at a red light, and drive up really fast to the car in front of you, and then stop and watch the person like put their hands up on the window and brace their feet, because so those were really great. And that Vanagon, I don't know, the odometer quit working like 4 years before it died, but the odometer was like 180,000 miles, and we just kept getting it fixed and getting it fixed and getting it fixed. And finally the engine died, and my husband was going to rebuild it. And so he took parts out of the car, and he was putting them in a save pile and in a must be replaced pile. And finally he called me out, and he had this like 2 wires over here and this huge pile over here. And he said, you know, Patty said, I don't think we're going to be able to rebuild this because the huge pile was everything that should be replaced. It just died, but it ran until it just dropped dead altogether. But we owned 2 Vanagons and 3 Jettas and a Passat wagon and a Eurovan, and now we don't have any VWs, which really sucks. We're gonna go look for some. The problem with it is that the more modern VWs are a different kind of car. They're still wonderful. My Passat is my favorite car that I've ever driven. It was really cool. But the problem with it is they break down and you can't fix them. They need, you need computers, and they're not backyard mechanic cars anymore, which makes them not as much fun. So we'll probably go back and find an old bus or something to play with, because I miss my beat-ups. It's my husband. He grew up in a very Scots family, and he's like, oh, we have to watch our mileage and watch our mileage. Well, I have our Toyota Camry we've had for 2 years, and I have 50,000 miles on it. You live outside of town, and you get a little self-indulgent and go to bookstores every day and things like that, and the mileage racks up. So what we do is we take very good care of our cars. We do religious oil changes and tire changes and make sure everything works right. But we put a lot of miles on cars. We travel a lot. My first book, Masks, well, first of all, it had my husband likes to call it a limited edition. It didn't sell very well when it came out. But unlike most authors I know, it was my first book. The first story I put together was a book, and it sold, which is cool. And it's based on characters that I played with from the time I was about 10 or 12, and worked out. In fact, Wolf, the secondary protagonist in it, is based on a character I created because I had terrible nightmares as a kid. It's really easy to scare it was really easy for me to scare myself. I used to scare my friends too, but I didn't like so much scaring myself. So I created this terribly evil and powerful thing that loved me. and after that, I didn't have any problem with nightmares. So I pulled him into Mask. And I always drew pictures when I was a kid. I could draw horses and dragons and girls, and that's it. But that's what I drew all the time. And I'm not alone. I know a lot of girls, middle school age, that draw horses, dragons, and girls. Sometimes not the dragons, but mostly the horses and girls. And people would stop and say, "Who's that?" or "Who's that supposed to be?" And I thought, don't you know? I just made it up. That's what So I made up stories about them, and would write 2 or 3 or 4 pages scenes about the pictures I wrote. And ultimately, the little stories I wrote were much better than my artwork. And when I was in college, I wrote the first 10 pages of Masks over about 4 years, over and over and over again, and made everybody I knew read them over and over again, and changed a comma and put a new word. And in fact, when I do the revision on Masks, which I'm contracted to do, that's the first thing we do is cut those 10 pages. They're horrible. They're really horrible. But
the 10 pages you could repeat by memory. Probably.
Oh yes, oh yes. I won't here, but yes, they are. Boy, but we moved to Chicago from Montana. Both of us are, born and raised Montana. And at the time, there's a building in Chicago, the Hancock Towers, and we took a tour on the Michigan Lakes, and they were talking about, and there are more people that work in that tower than live in the biggest city in Montana. That's changed a little bit because Montana's grown quite a bit in the last 10 years, but it was surreal moving to a place that had that many people, 7.5 million people. The population of Montana was 100,000. Well, no, it wasn't. It was 750,000 of Montana, and it's the 3rd biggest state in the U.S. Fourth. After California's still bigger than it, and it just blew me away. And rather than go to therapy, I went to my closet and wrote, and that's how I wrote the rest of Masks. And once I had it done, my husband said, Patty, if you wrote it, you might as well send it in. I'm like, well, it's horrible. He says, no, clean it up, write it, send it in. And so I did, and it got published, and was cool. And now it's a rarity because it did get published, and it fell off the turnip truck, and they sold all of 4,000 copies, which if you know anything about mass market, that's horrible, absolutely horrible. From a first-time author at the time, they liked to see a print run of about 20,000, and they liked to sell 12 to 15,000. And that was a print run of about 11,000. And I'm very fortunate that that Ace didn't realize how badly it had done until after they bought the second book, because they never would have. And the second book came out with a tremendous royal cover that sold it. So it picked up, and I'm very grateful, because if it hadn't, I would be writing probably under a different name. But yeah, and now Masks is selling for unholy amounts on eBay. If I had a box of them, I could make a lot more money than I ever earned from Masks. But of course, I'd sell them for cover price. I wouldn't gouge the market that way. But it is yeah, it's pretty extraordinary. And it's a first book. It's under 200 pages. I feel really bad when people spend $500 or $200 to $500 for a copy of it. So we're going to do revisions. I'm going to revise it into its sequel, its unpublished sequel, Wolf's Bane, so that we can hide from the ace bean counters that it's actually Masks that they are requiring, and put it out in the public eye again. So and then it'll be cool, because I'm a much better writer now than I was then, and I can fix some of the problems that it had. Daniel Dos Santos, I don't think there's a better cover artist out there right now. Particularly, well, there's some really awesome ones. It's hard to say, but for me, he has done just phenomenally. Each cover is better than the next, and the first one was awesome. He won the Chelsea Award for Mooncalled, which is the big award they give to fantasy artists, and boy, he deserved it. And each cover is better than the next, and it's neat.